All right. So we talked about earlier, and I said we were going to come back to it.
Yeah.
Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy.
One or two more guys, or are these the two guys? Okay.
Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. When we were talking about Rashad Bateman, both of them were mentioned as guys that are going ahead of Rashad Bateman.
Yes, both going ahead.
What are their ADPs right now?
I'm looking right now.
Because I dug into the historical data for Russell Wilson wide receivers, and really before 2019 when DK Metcalf was drafted, he had made a living making beta wide receivers alpha wide receivers.
Making them better.
He made Doug Baldwin wide receiver 7 in 2015, 10 in 2016, 14 in 2017. He made Tyler Lockett wide receiver 11 in 2018 and Doug Baldwin wide receiver 48 in 2018. But in 2019, once DK Metcalf got there, and he finally got really his first bona fide wide receiver 1 in his offense, the last 2 seasons, he supported, at worst, 2 top 13 wide receivers. In 2020, DK Metcalf was wide receiver 5, and Tyler Lockett was wide receiver 11. And in 2021, Tyler Lockett was wide receiver 11, and DK Metcalf was wide receiver 13 in a down year where everybody was crapping on him after week 8.
Russ got hurt, missed time. Like the Seahawks season went in the toilet last year. That affects individual production.
Yeah, but you're lost in that is the fact that over the last 2 seasons, once Russell Wilson finally got a bona fide wide receiver 1, he supported 2 top 13 wide receivers in back-to-back seasons. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that should be lost on the fantasy community here. So I know that Jerry Jeudy and Sutton have ADPs, you're saying, higher than Rashad Bateman.
Jerry Jeudy's ADP is 48.4. Courtland Sutton's is 51.2. So you have to draft them. Can I do math? 4th round. You gotta draft them both in the 4th round. Say middle of the 4th round to the end of the 4th round is where you have to go if you want one of the Broncos wide receivers.
And I know they have more of a supporting cast than the top 2 wide receivers ever had in Seattle, but it also should be a much heavier passing attack, more than the run 3 times and then run twice and then throw it on 3rd down Seahawks over the last few seasons.
No, the offensive coordinator or the head coach is Nathaniel Hackett. He's the Packers offensive coordinator.
Right. So Russ is going to throw more.
They're going to throw the ball more.
So I'm not shying away from Courtland Sutton specifically, and Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Again, 2020 DK Metcalf wide receiver 5. Courtland Sutton should be his new DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett wide receiver 11. Jerry Jeudy or maybe KJ Hamler or something like that should be his wide receiver 11. 2021 Tyler Lockett wide receiver 11. DK Metcalf wide receiver 13. I know that he's going to have to build up rapport with these new wide receivers, but still, the point stands. Russell Wilson will make these 2 wide receivers high-end fantasy wide receivers. Are their ADPs warranted to you with that information in mind?
It's a good tidbit to point out because, again, I think people are continuing to proceed with caution with these guys based off of their past couple of years, when they had abysmal quarterback play and both at some point or other sustained injuries that held them out for multiple weeks, if not longer. Jeudy's going off the board as the wide receiver 22, Sutton as the wide receiver 24. So literally low-end wide receiver 2s for both of them. Knowing what we know about what we have seen from Russ as far as supporting multiple high-end options at the position, I think it is fair to say that maybe both of them are being a little undervalued from that perspective. However, I'm fine with them. I'm fine with those ADPs simply from the standpoint that we just quite haven't seen it yet. Yes, we have seen it from Sutton. Sutton did it a couple of years ago. Proved that he is he can be a high-end option for fantasy purposes. We're a couple years removed from that, but again, one of those years was a torn ACL. The other was he was catching passes from Drew Lock. Jerry Jeudy was forced into a wide receiver 1 role as a rookie. Didn't quite get it done from a production standpoint, but also never clicked or connected with Drew Lock. And then again, last year, suffered a high ankle sprain week 1. That's a type of injury that can derail your entire season. And for Jeudy, for the most part, it did derail his season last year. He had a bad season. He didn't score any touchdowns. He had fewer than 500 yards receiving. However, his rookie year was a little bit more promising, despite the fact that it feels like, 1, ages ago, and 2, it feels like it wasn't even that good. 113 targets, 52 catches, 856 yards, 3 touchdowns. For a rookie with no expectations after what happened to Sutton and catching passes from Drew Lock, it's pretty damn good to come away with 132 fantasy points scored in half PPR. It's not bad. 0 touchdowns last year. That's going up with Russell Wilson. So Jerry Jeudy in the middle of the 4th round, I feel pretty good about that. Courtland Sutton, again, low-end wide receiver 2. You're not going to end up with both of these guys. I would say that's also fair. I wouldn't call them screaming buys, screaming values, just looking at the names going ahead of them. Maybe I say these guys should go ahead of George Kittle, sure. They're in the Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, DK Metcalf tier. Okay, fine. After that, I have a hard time moving them too much higher. So I think they're properly placed as far as ADP. But could they easily exceed those expectations, knowing what we know about what Russ can do to support his top weapons? Sure. I mean, DJ Moore is going 10 spots ahead of them. Deontay Johnson is going 10 spots ahead of them.
I'd rather wait and grab Sutton.
Or even Jeudy. Ezekiel Elliott is going ahead of them, which at this point feels like I wouldn't say that that's a clear-cut sell. Breece Hall is going ahead of them. I'm fine with that. David Montgomery is going ahead of them. I'm fine with that. I'll even say, Darren Waller is going ahead of them. I'm fine with that. I think I'd rather take a shot on a difference maker at tight end his ADP has fallen relative to last year, but now he's healthy. I'm fine with that. So there's a little bit of a mixed bag here. I think this is a good representation, this range of like 35 to 50 ADP. It's more volatile than drafters want to give it credit for. Take shots on guys who you believe in their upside. I think it's fair to say Jeudy and Sutton fit that mold, fit that argument.
And it's strange to me that Judy's ADP is so much higher than Sutton's.
Not so much. It's about 3 spots higher, but
okay.
I think it's fair to say Jeudy, we're comparing apples to oranges here, but I would say Sutton is more of the Metcalf, whereas Jeudy is more of the Lockett. And yes, Russ supported both of them being great, DK being the high-end wide receiver 1, but Lockett, there was a little bit more year-over-year consistency.
He was the wide receiver 11 in back-to-back seasons. DK had wide receiver 5 to wide receiver 13. So there might be a little bit more variance year-to-year in a Sutton's usage. But if Jeudy takes over that Lockett role, I mean, a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 perennially is... I'm not going to say lock it in, but about as much as you can lock something like that in, it's what I would be projecting.
Yeah.